Ithaca, New York was never the filmmaking capital of the world, nor were the Perils of Pauline ever made there. It was a small and, for a time, flourishing production center, not unlike so many others, when film was a young and growing medium. But there are those who remember the times for what they were. They remember when they made movies in Ithaca. Ithaca, in 1913, was a small resort. Its location at the base of Cayuga Lake in the New York Finger Lakes region, and the climate, made it an ideal tourist attraction. It had beautiful scenery, its own amusement park, and the excitement of Cornell's Big Red football team. Into that environment came Theodore and Leo Wharton to film the team that played high above Cayuga's waters in a game against Penn State. They stayed longer than they had planned. The Whartons established their studio at Renwick, the old amusement park at the end of the lake. The park had been organized by the Ithaca Street Railway Company several years before, and the Whartons first arranged its lease and then later its purchase. The old open-air roller skating rink was enlarged and became the soundstage and base of their operations. And so the stars came to Ithaca. It was an overnight ride from New York and a good 3 days from Chicago on the Limited. But they were filmmakers, and the harried train trips were nothing compared to the rigors of shooting schedules. But then, those were the days when a three-reeler was finished in 3 days. They came to Ithaca, star and filmmaker alike, because of the natural beauty of the locale. Nowhere else could they find the variety of terrains that figured so largely in their exterior-oriented productions. They had the gorges by Cornell, the falls of Taghanic, and the lakefronts of Beebe and Cayuga. They went for the natural location and the realism that they provided. For the filming of the white slave trade epic, The Great White Trail, the Whartons chose Upper Enfield in Tompkins County. It wasn't Alaska, but the snow was real. But some situations didn't change. Ithaca had the dubious distinction of being between what some old-timers called the dark belt and the wet belt of New York State. The area got the worst of both conditions, and the weather began to get the better of the Whartons. But it didn't dampen the spirit of the times. It was the age of the cliffhanger. The serial was everybody's favorite matinee, and the stunt was a recognized art form. The serial was big business in Ithaca. The exploits of Elaine, the romance of Elaine, and the new exploits of Elaine all starred Pearl White and stirred the embers of excitement in the balcony. In a good afternoon, one could expect the heroine to be hurled off a moving train, tied to the tracks, chastised by the villain, and idolized by the hero, only to be left on the brink of danger as the matinee closed. You came to the movies remembering last week's dangerous climax, knowing it would all work out, and yet there you were at dusk, hurrying home for dinner, wondering how they'd save the day next week. Here's the way they played the same scene in the controversial Patria. It was made in Ithaca in 1919 by the Whartons, and for a time banned by President Wilson for its inflammatory effect on international relations. Judicious editing eventually removed offensive references to specific foreign powers. It was an era of cheap talent. The extras were plentiful, and new faces were always cropping up. The Whartons were good movie makers, but their financial dealings were a disaster worse than any train wreck, real or faked. Their contracts for distribution made every film a failure before it reached the box office. It was the end of an era for the Whartons and virtually the end of entertainment filmmaking in Ithaca. The two brothers went to South Arizona and later west to California, but never again did they find the same level of success. People wondered, too, what became of the films they had made. One story places the blame on the town fire marshal. The films were made with the old explosive nitrate base, and they had been locked away for years in one of the outbuildings on the Renwick lot. Local kids had been stealing the prints, and as any good fire marshal would, he set out to avoid a hazard in the making. He put the flammable prints in a boat and rowed himself a few hundred yards out into Huga Lake. And there, in plain sight of where the wardens had made it all happen, he threw them overboard. And they were lost forever.